Every year, this is the hardest time for me, and Brad. I mean, there's nothing worse than watching guys just give everything they've got, bust their rear, the blood, the sweat, all of it, the angst, you know, the good, the bad, and that's hard. It's hard to look them in the eye and tell them, that hey, this is as far as it goes for now.
That was Dan Campbell talking about roster cuts and how hard it is. These are working guys, right? Just like you and me going out trying to earn a spot on this roster, trying out for a job. And, this is the toughest time of the year. You find out all that blood, sweat, and tears that you put into training camp, it was for nothing. You had a good tryout, you spent a couple weeks with the team. Unfortunately, your best wasn't enough. So, first and foremost, before we get into the video, kudos to everyone who tried out for the Detroit Lions this year. If you were cut or waived, best of luck to you. Us fans, me especially, support you and want nothing for the best in the future. With that said, we have our first initial, we'll call it, 53-man roster. And I don't think I've ever seen anything like this before. 29 defensive players on the roster as it stands right now to 21 offensive players, and of course our 3 special teamers. So things are pretty lopsided as they stand right now. However, that was intentional by Brad Holmes. We have so much more depth on the defensive side of ball this year that we want to protect these players, hopefully get them back to our practice squad, hopefully get them on our 53-man roster, and then we can add in some offensive depth. So let's dive into the defense first, and then we'll end with the offense. On defense, there wasn't too crazy in terms of cuts. Starling Thomas V, Chase Lucas, Brady Breeze, a few notable names that we ended up cutting. However, a lot of our depth pieces we ended up keeping. At linebacker, we kept 6 linebackers. So Anthony Pittman, Jalen Reeves-Maybin, 2 people that were on the roster bubble made the squad, which is kind of curious. I was kind of thinking that one of those 2 may not make it. We ended up keeping both of them, primarily for their contributions on special teams. In addition to that, we also have 7 cornerbacks. Just today, the Lions activated Emmanuel Mosley to the 53-man roster. That kind of tells us that knee is well on its way from recovery. And, he'll probably get some playing time this year. That tells us that knee is healed up. It's ready to go. He's probably going to get some playing time pretty early on. Probably not week 1, but maybe week 2, week 3, we'll see Emmanuel Mosley start taking reps in the game. After that, the Detroit Lions kept 5 defensive linemen. A super high number. I was expecting one of these guys to be cut. When I did my first initial 53-man predictions, we only carried 4 defensive linemen, but we do carry 5. Again, I think they're saving some of those guys there just so no one else gets claimed or signs elsewhere. And I think we're going to send a couple people to injured reserve as well. We want them on our team. We want to send them to injured reserve. That way they only miss 4 games. But to activate that, they have to make the initial 53-man roster. So Brad Holmes working some magic here. Going to send 2 people, maybe 3, to injured reserve. They're going to miss those first 4 games of the season and then come back to the team. This is to protect players, and then we'll go back and sign a few of our offensive depth pieces later on. Overall, I feel pretty good about the defense. I think this year, more so than others, we showed the depth that Brad Holmes has been able to create on the defensive side of the ball, whereas last year we didn't have that depth. And this is going to be super important when we get into those later months, November, December, and we're playing meaningful football. We're going to want depth on the defensive side of the ball. So kudos to Brad Holmes, working his magic on the 53-man roster, try to protect and save as many of those defensive depth pieces as he can. On the offensive side of the ball, there were a couple noticeable cuts that Brad Holmes made. Maurice Alexander being the first, followed by Jamar Jefferson, also Craig Reynolds and Beanie Snell. So the Lions are rolling into this initial 53-man roster with only 2 running backs and 1 fullback if you count Jason Kabinda in there, but he was kept for his special teams contribution. And we also kept 5 wide receivers. So from an offensive skills position, we're pretty light. With only 5 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and 1 fullback, I do expect us to make some moves, claim some guys once we start sending those defensive players to IR. And then we have the 2 quarterbacks, Teddy Bridgewater and Jared Goff, of course. Offensive line is pretty stacked. We ended up keeping 8 people. You could push that up to 9 if you want to, but the depth there it's pretty decent with Sorsdale, Graham Glasgow, and Mountain Nelson. Is it ideal? No. But those are all players outside of Colby who have playing experience, so they're not rookies are not going to come in not knowing what to do. They're going to feel pretty comfortable assuming a role if someone does go out. Not to mention, too, both Graham Glasgow and Matt Nelson are pretty versatile, with Graham Glasgow being able to play almost all three interior offensive line positions. So his value, is immense to this team. Outside of that, tight end is going to be another place. We kept 3 tight ends. Could have kept 4, but I don't think they liked anyone else behind James Mitchell. So they're going to run 3 tight ends. Might add a body there later on in the year, or once the cuts have processed and we put in some waiver claims. Kind of curious to see what happens there. Initially, offensively, we're kind of light. I wish we had a little bit more depth, and I'm sure we'll work some magic, sign a couple more guys as we get closer to the weekend. But, be on the lookout. There's going to be some moves made. This isn't the final be-all 53-man roster. We are going to add some more pieces as the days go on, as we get closer to the Kansas City Chiefs game. I'm not going to lie. I was actually kind of surprised we didn't cut more bodies on the defensive side of the ball. But it just really shows how they feel about the defensive depth this year and what the guys that they were able to procure and add to the defensive side of the ball. It really shows that they have a lot of confidence. I wasn't expecting Julian Aquara to make this team. I wasn't expecting Benito Jones to make this team. I expect those last 5 spots to be tinkered with, rotating some other guys. I wouldn't be surprised if we make a few cuts, replace with some other people from different practice squads. I mean, we got to remember, Brad Holmes comes from a scouting background. So in that department, they're scouring all the other 31 teams looking for more talent. So be on the lookout. Expect some more changes. This isn't the end-all, be-all. I don't think we're going to roll with this exact 53-man roster into Kansas City. We're going to add a couple pieces. May not be high-end talent, but it's going to be some couple depth pieces who can potentially make a difference. And not to mention, I haven't seen anything yet about the practice squad. So it's going to be kind of curious to see into tomorrow, into Thursday, if we sign anyone else, fill out that practice squad. Just be on the lookout for that. A lot of good things to come. Hey guys, leave a comment down below the like button and let me know who you thought would have been cut. Who did you think, might have stayed on the roster? Who do you think the Lions might be targeting to see if we're going to add any more pieces to this team? I think, Brad Holmes has done tinkering. So let me know what your guys' thoughts are. I'm really curious to hear who you thought might have gotten cut and didn't, or who got cut but you expected to make this roster. I think there was a couple of surprises in there.